and welcome to World News on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. The United States Army Europe and Africa Command has announced plans to relocate American personnel and military equipment from Jastrzębie Airport to other parts of Poland. According to a report from the U.S. Army Command, the move is a planned redeployment following months of deliberations aimed at, quote, optimizing American military operations, improving support for allied nations and partners, as well as increasing efficiency. The Polish airport near Rzeszów will still be used as a hub for transporting NATO and allied military aid to Ukraine. American forces were deployed to Jastrzębie following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and were later joined by anti-air crews from Germany and Norway, among others. Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz wrote on X that U.S. forces will remain in the country as he provided more details about America's planned redeployment of troops and equipment from Jastrzębie Airport in southwestern Poland. The base acts as a key transit hub for Ukrainian aid.
US troops are staying in Poland. In accordance with the decision made at the NATO summit in Washington, the nature of the mission in Jastrzębie is changing. The current tasks of American soldiers in Jastrzębie are being taken over by other allies. US troops will remain in Poland, but in other locations. Now the mission in Jastrzębie mainly involves Norwegian, German, British and Polish troops alongside other allies. NATO, as part of the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine mission, takes over responsibility for the operation of Jastrzębie, as we have been reporting since July 2024.
During his visit to Tallin, Estonia, Polish President Andrzej Duda said the trip is preparation for two very important international events, namely the Three Seas Initiative Summit, as well as the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague. He also said that he recently wrote an official letter to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte asking for an increase to the alliance's minimum defense spending threshold.
This visit is preparation for two very important international events on the horizon. The first is the Three Seas Initiative Summit, which will begin in Warsaw on April 28th in almost 3 weeks. At the gathering, we will discuss infrastructure development problems in our part of Europe, as well as the Rail Baltica, Via Baltica and Via Carpathia projects, alongside power grid synchronization, which is undoubtedly a great success of Estonia and the Baltic states, which I'm happy Poland contributed to and continuously supports.
Przez pana prezydenta Rail Baltice, Via Baltice, Via Carpatii. Drugim takim wielkim wydarzeniem, do którego...
The second major event we're preparing for is the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague. We talked about increasing defense spending, as it's one of the main topics of discussion in the alliance right now. Recently, I wrote an official letter to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. I propose that all member states vote in favor of raising the minimum defense spending threshold to 3% of GDP from the current 2%.
The European Union is planning to hit back at the US tariffs by targeting specific imports from across the Atlantic. Our Europe correspondent Alex Cadier is in Brussels with the details. Good afternoon, Alex. What goods does the EU have in its crosshairs?
Well, that was been the question for the last week when those trade ministers were meeting in Luxembourg just yesterday. There was a big question as to what the retaliation might look like. Well, we have some details. I've actually seen the leaked draft of what these retaliatory measures could include. They could include steel, textiles, eggs, dental floss, poultry, and numerous other U.S. exports. We also heard from the European Commission spokesperson just in the last hour, confirming that a plan looking at reciprocal tariffs for cars is in the works and could be revealed as early as next week. Of course, all of this in response to the tariffs put forward by Donald Trump and his administration. He was speaking about this just in the last few hours. Let's have a listen to what he said.
And yet they send millions of cars in a year, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S., but we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places, but let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair and reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair. We have a deficit with the European Union of $350 billion. And it's going to disappear fast. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that that can disappear easily and quickly is they're going to have to buy our energy from us because they need it They're going to have to buy it from us. They can buy it. We can knock off $350 billion in 1 week.
Now, Donald Trump setting out the U.S.'s negotiating position on this, which will have been perhaps a little bit confusing here in Brussels. The EU has already offered to buy more American LNG, and on cars, on reciprocal tariffs on cars. Just in the last 24 hours, Ursula von der Leyen announced an offer, a deal that the U.S. could take of 0-for-0 tariffs on industrial goods, including cars for the United States, something Donald Trump said was not enough. Certainly what's happening in Brussels, two phases to this. One is a preparation for retaliation, and the other one is a push for negotiation, because clearly the European position on this is that this would be extraordinarily damaging for the European and US economies. They want to negotiate a deal rather than escalate a trade war.
Many thanks, Alex Cadier, reporting live from Brussels. Beijing is refusing to bow to what it called U.S. blackmail as a worldwide trade war sparked by President Donald Trump's widespread tariffs shows little sign of letting up. After significant losses at the start of the week, battered stock markets appear to have steadied in early trading on Tuesday. China's comments come after the American leader threatened to further increase tariffs on U.S. imports from the world's second largest economy. Trump said he would push tariffs to more than 100% on Wednesday in response to China's decision to match the reciprocal 34% duties Trump announced last week. These are on top of the 20% tariff announced at the start of Trump's second term. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson warned that trade wars have no winners. As the world witnessed wild market swings triggered by new U.S. tariffs on Monday, former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki told TVP World in an exclusive interview that he remains optimistic. Despite mounting fears of a full-blown trade war, Bielecki believes Europe still has a strategic window of opportunity.
Well, I think I'm in the medium term, I'm an optimist, and I think that the Europeans could come out from this situation, even with some rebalance or a little bit restructure economy, so it should be good. Okay, if some, let's call it quite politely, unnecessary welfare policy could be a little bit adjusted, it's only good for the competitiveness of the economy.
In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Kyiv troops are still present in Russia's Belgorod region. Our Kyiv correspondent Oz Katerji reports on Zelensky's claim.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Ukrainian troops were active across the border inside Russia, still in the Kursk region, but also in the Belgorod region in his nightly address to Ukrainians on Monday night. Let's take a listen to what he had to say in that address.
Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky also reported today on the front line our presence in the Kursk region and in the Belgorod region. We continue active operations in the border areas on enemy territory, and this is absolutely fair. The war must return to where it came from. Our primary objective remains protecting our land and shielding our communities in Sumy and Kharkiv regions from Russian occupiers. The Commander-in-Chief reported on the activity of our units along the borderline in the so-called gray zone and directly on enemy territory. Importantly, thanks to the bravery and resilience of our warriors in the Kursk region, thanks to the entire Kursk operation, we've been able to reduce pressure on other parts of the front, particularly in the Donetsk region.
So the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky there confirming that Ukrainian troops are ongoing active operations inside Russia in the Kursk region and the Belgorod region in what Kyiv sees as defensive actions to protect their northern regions such as Sumy and Kharkiv. The question is, how do these operations impact Ukraine's defense across other parts of the front line where Russia has been advancing, such as in the east, near the Toretsk, in in Donetsk region or in the south towards Zaporizhia, where the Russians have been putting a lot of pressure on Ukrainian troops. The Ukrainians will argue that these measures are defensive. They're meant to prevent Russia from taking territory in the north of the country. But the question remains as to can Ukraine keep enough supplies to that really long front line that they are creating for themselves by continuing these operations inside Russia. It's Oz Kataji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
The reason the US is not implementing tariffs on Russia is that the US is not doing any business with Russia, said President Donald Trump, responding to a question from a reporter. Trump also mentioned that he was not happy with Moscow's continued attacks against Ukraine.
The reason we're not talking about tariffs with Russia is because we're not doing business essentially with Russia because they're in a war. And I'm not happy about what's going on with the bombing, because they're bombing like crazy right now. They're bombing. I don't know what's happening there. That's not a good situation. So we're meeting with Russia. We're meeting with Ukraine. And we're getting sort of close. But I'm not happy with all the bombing that's going on the last week or so. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
Crude oil prices have seen a modest rebound after the latest serious decline caused by rising US-China trade tensions. Yet, according to analysts, risks of price fluctuations still remain. Oil prices have hit their lowest mark since 2021 in the aftermath of US President Donald Trump's sweeping tariff plan. Brent crude oil futures went up by around 1% since then, indicating that investors are expecting prices to rise. However, US producers need oil prices to stay above a minimum of around $62 per barrel in order to profitably extract it, and currently they're below that. If they don't rise above the break-even price for a significant period of time, US shale producers might be forced to cut their production. Serbian cyclists carrying evidence of human rights violations have arrived in Vienna, one of the few stops along their way to Strasbourg, France. Their mission? Delivering the documents highlighting the Serbian government's crimes against protesters to the European Court of Human Rights. 50 cyclists are making the journey from Novi Sad to Strasbourg with plans to arrive on April 17th. Their message is clear. Justice does not come on its own. It is one step by step, pedal by pedal. Serbian protests have been ongoing since November 1st, 2024, after a concrete canopy collapsed at a newly renovated train station in Novi Sad, killing 15 people. During their Monday meeting, the Israeli Prime Minister and the American President reaffirmed their intent to resettle residents of the Gaza Strip elsewhere. Benjamin Netanyahu added he's simply giving people options, while Trump called the area, quote, a death trap.
Gazans were closed in, and every other place, including in arenas of battle, I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Now, we've been talking, including over lunch, about some countries, I won't go into them right now, that are saying, you know, if Gazans want to leave, we want to take them in. And I think this is the right thing to do. If you give, you know, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it. I hope we'll have good news for you.
Gaza is one of the most dangerous places in the world. So they gave it away for good intention, and it didn't work out that way. And a lot of people like my concept, but, you know, there are other concepts that I like, too. And there are some concepts I don't like. You know what I don't like? The way it is now. Because right now it's a dangerous death trap, Gaza.
And that concludes World News at 2 p.m. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.